The sky hung heavy over the small college town of Fairmorn, Texas. Gray clouds rolled low, and a steady rain washed over the quiet streets. Water pooled along the sidewalks as Thomas Reed walked alone, his backpack sagging on one shoulder, his head bowed against the cold drizzle. At 23, Thomas was fighting a losing battle, finishing his final year in law school, working nights at a grocery store, and trying to pay off the crushing debts left by his late father. Each day felt tighter than the last, like the world was slowly closing in. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him from his thoughts. "This is Thomas," he answered, trying to mask the weariness in his voice. A refined, measured voice responded, "Mr. Reed, this is Vivian Hale. I'd like to speak with you. It's about your financial situation." He stopped mid-step. "I'm sorry, who?" "I know enough," she interrupted calmly. "Meet me at Hale and Hearth Cafe. 7 o'clock. It's important." The call ended before he could ask another question. Still confused, and more than a little unnerved, Thomas made his way to the cafe as the rain turned heavier. His jacket clung damp to his skin by the time he arrived. Warm air greeted him as he stepped inside, the scent of roasted coffee beans and baked bread easing some of the tension in his shoulders. In a corner booth sat a woman who looked like she owned the place. Vivian Hale. Her silver hair was immaculately styled, and the navy suit she wore looked custom-made. Every detail of her presence, her posture, her expression, radiated control and quiet power. "Thomas," she said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "Please." He hesitated, but sat down. "Mrs. Hale, I'm not sure what this is about." "You're direct." "That's good," she replied, her voice crisp. "I'm aware of your situation, the debts your father left behind, your family's struggle. I'm here with an offer." His brow creased. "What kind of offer?" She lifted her teacup, then set it down with perfect precision. Her gaze met his. "Marry me." The word struck like a slap in the silence between them. Thomas stared, convinced he'd misunderstood. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me," she said, calm as ever. "This isn't about love. It's a contract. I'll clear your debts. Secure your future. In return, you become my husband." He blinked, then laughed, short and disbelieving. "You're serious?" "Completely," she said, folding her hands. "You're young, unattached, and cornered. I don't need affection, Thomas. I need a companion, someone to carry my name, stand beside me in public, and nothing more." He shook his head, thought swirling. "Why me? What's in it for you?" For the first time, something softened in her expression. "I've spent nearly 7 decades alone. I have no family left, no heirs. I want company, even if it's only for appearance. And I want control over my legacy. A husband helps protect that." Thomas stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. I need to think." "Take your time," she said evenly. "But not too much. The offer won't last forever." Rain poured harder as he walked home, soaked to the bone and lost in thought. That night, he sat with his mother at their kitchen table. The toll of her illness had bled them dry, and his younger sister's college tuition still loomed like a mountain he couldn't climb. He told her everything. "I know it sounds insane," he said, head in his hands. "Marrying someone I don't love, just for money." His mother reached out, her voice trembling. "I'm asking you to survive. To give yourself a chance. And to save us, Thomas." The next morning, he returned to the cafe. Vivian was already seated, tablet in hand, looking exactly as she had before, poised, composed, unreadable. "You've made your decision?" she asked without looking up. Thomas drew in a breath that felt like it might break him. "I'll do it." She gave a small, satisfied nod. "Good. The arrangements begin today." 1 week later, Thomas stood inside a modest courthouse, dressed in the charcoal suit Vivian had provided. The ceremony was swift, attended only by her attorney and a notary. As he repeated his vows, a strange stillness fell over him, like he was watching someone else speak the words. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Vivian simply turned and offered him a polite smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. "Welcome to your new life, Mr. Reed." And together, they stepped into the grey afternoon, the rain falling steadily behind them. A gentle drizzle fell once more from the sky, soaking the quiet town in a silver mist. As the cab rolled up the long driveway, Thomas Reed stared out the rain-speckled window. In a puddle near the gate, he caught his own reflection, blurred, uncertain. Had he just saved his family? Or sold what little was left of himself? The iron gates to the Hale estate creaked open with a reluctant groan. The mansion beyond loomed like something out of a history book, tall columns, a flawless stone facade, and the kind of grandeur only old money could afford. But its windows were dark, too dark, like eyes that had long since stopped blinking. Thomas stepped out, suitcase in hand, heart unsteady. Vivian was waiting in the grand foyer, as polished and unreadable as ever. Her tailored dress fit like armor, pearls at her neck, posture unwavering. "Welcome, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice cool and formal. The name choice sent a chill down his back. "Dinner is at 7. I trust you'll find your room acceptable." Without another word, she turned and walked away. A housekeeper, silent and stern, led Thomas through pristine hallways to a room that looked more like a five-star suite than a bedroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens. Antique furniture gleamed with age and polish. And yet, it felt cold. Lifeless. Like no one had lived in it for years. Dinner was served at a long, candlelit table that could seat 20. Vivian sat at the far end, dressed in silk, slicing into her fillet with eerie precision. A staff of quiet, faceless servers moved around them like shadows. "I trust you're settling in," she said without looking up. "It's different," Thomas replied cautiously. "This place feels like a maze. I keep thinking I'll turn a corner and get lost." "You might," she said with a faint smile. "Or you'll learn your way. Either way, you're here now." Thomas bristled at her bluntness. "You haven't said much about your late husband," he said. Her knife paused in midair. She dabbed the corner of her lips with a cloth napkin before answering. "He was in business," she said quietly. "Like your father. Their paths crossed once or twice." Her voice shifted, just slightly, darker, lower. "But not all encounters end well." Thomas's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" She looked up, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Let's just say some business never quite finishes." She lifted her wine glass, her voice calm again. "You'll understand, in time, why I chose you." The cryptic remark sat in the air long after she'd moved on. Later that night, Thomas wandered the estate's endless halls. The silence was unnatural, too perfect. Floorboards creaked beneath his feet, and every locked door he passed seemed to hold its breath. Each brass handle gleamed in the low light, like it was daring him to ask questions he wasn't supposed to. As the days passed, the tension grew. The staff avoided eye contact. Conversation stopped when he entered the room. He caught fragments in the hallway, whispered, unfinished sentences. "Why him?" "She never does anything without a reason." "He'll figure it out." "They always do." Thomas tried to focus on school, but every night the mansion called to him, in its silence, in its secrets. One evening, while pacing the vast library, he noticed something unusual. Vivian's desk, usually spotless, was cluttered. Scattered papers, open folders, and a small, ornate key rested in the center, catching the glow of a green-shaded lamp. No one was around. His heart pounded as he reached for it. The key was heavier than it looked. Cold to the touch. Intricate, antique, like it belonged to something old. Maybe one of the locked doors. He slipped it into his pocket, a rush of guilt and adrenaline flooding his chest. That night, in the solitude of his lavish room, Thomas turned the key over in his hands. What was she hiding? Why him? What kind of woman marries a stranger, erases his debt, and surrounds herself with locked rooms and whispers? The house was silent, unnaturally so, as he slipped barefoot into the hallway. The key pressed cool against his thigh, like a warning. He stopped at one of the doors he'd passed before. Its handle glinted faintly in the moonlight leaking through tall windows. Glancing once over his shoulder, he slid the key into the lock. Click. The sound echoed like a crack in the silence. Slowly, he pushed the door open. The room beyond was a time capsule. Faded wallpaper, covered furniture, and the smell of dust thick in the air. Photographs in tarnished silver frames lined a side table. Vivian, decades younger, beside a man Thomas didn't recognize. Another couple appeared in some, people he had never seen before. But what drew his eyes most was the desk. Neatly stacked papers. Documents, maybe letters. Something about them felt wrong. Like the final piece of a puzzle no one wanted solved. Thomas flipped through the stack of papers with trembling fingers. The deeper he read, the tighter his chest became. Legal contracts. Letters. Failed ventures. His father's name kept surfacing, alongside Vivian's late husband, in business deals that had crumbled catastrophically. One letter, handwritten in sharp, slanted ink, stopped him cold. You ruined everything. My family was left with nothing because of your lies. The anger practically bled off the page. Thomas's breath hitched. His father had never mentioned these dealings, never hinted at a betrayal buried so deep. Then, at the bottom of the pile, something made his blood run cold. A marriage license. His name. Her name. Signed. Stamped. Dated weeks before the ceremony. Earlier than he had ever known. Lying beside the papers was an old leather-bound journal. Its cover worn. Its pages yellowed. Vivian's diary. His hands shook as he opened it. He'll never know until it's too late. I'll use the name of the man who destroyed mine. He'll be mine, a tool, nothing more. I will take everything from him, just as his father took from me. The word struck like thunder. He wasn't a husband. He was a pawn. A quiet creak behind him made him spin around. Vivian stood in the doorway, shadowed, still, her presence like ice in the warm lamplight. "Enjoying yourself?" she asked, her voice razor-sharp. I didn't mean to," Thomas began, guilt rising in his throat. "You thought you'd find answers here?" She stepped forward, her silhouette cutting against the golden glow of the hallway. "Curiosity," she murmured, "kills more than just cats, Thomas. What exactly do you think you're doing?" His voice cracked, but he stood firm. "Why did you marry me? Was this ever real? Or am I just some twisted revenge story?" Her eyes flared. "It's not your place to ask questions. You signed the deal. You wear the ring. That should be enough." "It's not," he snapped. "You lied to me. You trapped me. This isn't marriage, it's a prison." Vivian's lips curled into a cold smile. "A prison? No, dear. A reckoning." She stepped closer, her voice like venom now. "You may think you're different from your father, smarter, kinder, cleaner. But you're just like him. Blinded by ego. Too naive to see the damage you carry until it's buried someone else." Thomas's jaw clenched. "If you hated him, why not confront him? Why punish me?" She stared at him, long, hard, something unreadable behind her gaze. "Because sometimes," she whispered, "children carry the debt." Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, heels clicking softly down the hall. That night, Thomas lay in bed, heart hammering against his ribs. The documents. The diary. Her words. None of it made sense. And yet, it all did. He was in deeper than he'd imagined. A voice echoed faintly down the corridor, Vivian's, sharp and commanding. He slipped out of bed, crept through the dark hall, and leaned against the closed door of her study. "Make sure the transfer is complete," she was saying. "We can't afford hesitation. He can't back out now. Time is running out." Thomas's breath caught in his throat. Transfer. No way out. Running out of time. Whatever she was planning, it wasn't over. The next morning, Thomas sat alone in the Grand Library, the walls suddenly feeling closer than before. Chandeliers sparkled above, fireplaces flickered softly, but nothing felt warm anymore. The house had changed. Or maybe he had. He needed answers. Allies. Anything. That's when he found Mr. Harris. The estate's head butler moved with quiet precision, his age marked by streaks of grey and a slight stoop, but there was something in his eyes, a weight that said he'd seen too much. "Mr. Harris," Thomas said, approaching him. "I need help. Something's wrong. I can feel it." The butler turned, hands clasped behind his back. He studied Thomas in silence before speaking. "I was wondering," he said quietly, "how long it would take before you came to me." "You know something, don't you?" Thomas asked. "About Vivian. About why I'm here." Harris hesitated, then nodded. "You're not the first young man to walk through those gates with no idea what awaited him. Vivian Hale is many things, brilliant, strategic, ruthless. But merciful." He shook his head. "Never." Thomas's stomach twisted. Then why stay? Why serve someone like that? Mr. Harris looked away. For the first time, his voice cracked with something like regret. "Some of us," he said, "don't get to walk away. Not anymore." Thomas looked at the man, at the tired strength behind his eyes, and felt something shift. He needed to get out. But first, he needed to know exactly what he was up against. Thomas sat alone in a quiet corner of the campus library, phone pressed to his ear. "Peter, quick question," he said casually, trying to sound relaxed. "Hypothetically, if someone signs a legal agreement under manipulation or false pretenses, is there any way to void it?" There was a pause on the line. Peter, his old law school buddy, finally responded, "Hypothetically? Sure, but you'd need solid proof. Coercion, fraud, hidden intent." "Why?" Thomas forced a laugh. "Just for a paper I'm writing. Appreciate it, man." But it wasn't for a paper. It was for his life. The next few days, Thomas carefully searched Vivian's study whenever she was out. He avoided cameras, made mental notes of drawer patterns, even counted the number of seconds it took the door to fully click shut. Late one night, beneath a stack of estate ledgers, he found a sealed envelope. His father's name was scrawled across the front. The letter inside was long, venomous, written in Vivian's unmistakable hand. It detailed embezzlement, lies, a real estate deal gone wrong. She accused his father of draining her family's fortune and breaking her husband, Harold, a man who, she claimed, died of a heart attack under the stress of financial ruin. "You left us with nothing," she had written. "My husband's heart couldn't carry the weight. And now he's gone because of you. Your family will pay, I will make sure of it." Thomas's stomach turned. This wasn't about wealth. It was revenge. Slow, patient, and cruel. Vivian hadn't married him to share a life. She'd married him to balance a scale only she could see. That night, he started planning his exit. Mapping routes through the estate. Studying the gates, security rotations, even the old service tunnel he'd spotted near the west wing. But Vivian was always one step ahead. The next morning, he found her waiting in the breakfast room, sipping coffee like a queen holding court. "You've been busy," she said. Thomas froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. "I'm not sure what you mean." Her lips curled into a cold smile. "Don't insult me. If you think you can outwit me, you're mistaken. I've gone head-to-head with sharks twice your size." He steadied his voice. "I haven't done anything wrong." Vivian leaned in, her voice dropping to a venom-laced whisper. "If you betray me, Thomas, you'll wish you hadn't." Then she stood, calm as ever, and walked away, leaving the weight of her threat behind like a fog that refused to lift. But Thomas refused to back down. That afternoon, pacing in the Grand Library, he met again with the private investigator he'd hired weeks ago. The man's face was grim as he handed over the final report. Harold Hale, Vivian's late husband, had indeed been swindled in a fraudulent land development deal involving Thomas's father. The family lost everything. Harold died of cardiac failure not long after. Vivian had clawed her way back, slowly rebuilding her empire, through strategic marriages, shady investments, and ruthless manipulation. Thomas wasn't just a symbol. He was the final act. Later that week, Thomas met Peter in secret, far from the estate. Together, they reviewed the documents, the diary entries, the forged signatures, the evidence of illegal partnerships currently propping up Vivian's financial network. "She's laundering money," Peter whispered, scanning a falsified contract. "And she's using your name to do it." Thomas felt his fists tighten. It ends now. The next morning, Thomas waited in the sitting room of the estate. He dressed with purpose, no longer playing the part of a passive guest or confused husband. The folder sat on his lap, heavy with evidence. When Vivian entered, she looked as polished and composed as ever. But something in her eyes flickered. "We need to talk," Thomas said, standing to face her. She raised a curious eyebrow. "Do we? What could possibly be so urgent?" He opened the folder and pulled out the first few documents. His voice was clear, controlled. "I know everything. About my father. About Harold. About how you used me to rebuild your empire. Every piece of it." For the first time, her mask cracked. She glanced at the papers. Her posture stiffened. But she said nothing, because she knew the game was shifting. And for the first time, Thomas was holding the pieces. Vivian's voice sliced through the room, low and icy. "You've been snooping again, haven't you?" Thomas didn't flinch. He stepped closer, fury lacing his voice. "Do you even understand what this obsession has done to the people around you? I didn't deserve this." Vivian's jaw tightened, the mask of control cracking for just a moment. "And my husband deserved to die? My family deserved to be left with nothing while your father lived in comfort." Her voice trembled, but not with grief, with rage. "Don't you dare talk to me about fairness." Thomas held up the folder of evidence, papers he had pieced together over weeks of sleepless nights. "This won't bring him back, Vivian. This, what you've done, it won't undo the past. All you've done is hurt more people, ruined more lives. When does it end?" For the first time since he met her, Vivian didn't respond right away. Her shoulders slumped slightly. A breath caught in her throat. And in that moment, Thomas saw something almost human. Maybe even regret. "You remind me of him, you know," she said quietly. "Harold. That same fire. That same stubbornness." Thomas blinked, momentarily thrown off by the shift. "I didn't expect to feel anything for you, Thomas. But here we are." "If that's true," Thomas said, voice steadier now, "then stop this. Let it go, before you lose yourself completely." But before she could answer, the sound of tires crunching against the gravel outside pierced the silence. Moments later, footsteps echoed in the hall. Uniformed officers entered the room, led by Peter. "Vivian Hale," the officer announced. "You're under arrest. We have a warrant charging you with multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and financial misconduct." Vivian didn't move. Her eyes flicked toward the folder in Thomas's hand, then to his face. "You called them," she said quietly. Thomas held her gaze. "You left me no choice." As she was escorted out, Vivian looked back one last time. "You may think you've won," she said coldly. "But revenge doesn't vanish just because one person walks away. Be careful, Thomas. It has a way of coming for you, too." He said nothing, but the chill her words left behind lingered. The sharp bang of a gavel echoed through the courtroom. Vivian sat stone-faced as the judge finalized the sentencing. Her once unshakable presence had dulled, not broken, but dimmed. Thomas watched from the back, unmoving. His testimony had helped reduce her sentence. He hadn't done it out of pity. He did it because somewhere in the tangled wreckage of pain and vengeance, he saw the outline of a story too complicated for black and white justice. As Vivian was led out of the courtroom, she glanced back. No words. Just a quiet nod, not quite apology, but not defiance either. Days later, Thomas stood at the gates of the estate one last time. The grand home looked less like a monument now and more like a mausoleum, hollow, tired, and forgotten. Vivian had left instructions. Her lawyer met him in the drawing room and handed him a deed. Along with it, a sealed envelope, her handwriting unmistakable. It was never about the money, Thomas. It was about closure. Harold deserved justice. But I lost sight of what really mattered. You reminded me that it's possible to move forward. This place isn't a monument to my pain anymore. It can be something better. Use it well. Thomas sold the estate. It wasn't a hard decision. It had always felt like a cage, for him, for her, for the ghosts they both carried. With the proceeds, he cleared his mother's medical debts and finally paid off his sister's tuition. The weight of his father's legacy, once suffocating, began to lift. But he didn't stop there. With the remaining funds, Thomas created the Harold Hale Memorial Scholarship, an initiative for students who'd lost everything, like Vivian once had, and needed a second chance. Back at law school, the world felt different. He interned at a legal aid center, helping those left voiceless by systems that never cared. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even redemption. It was just purpose. One crisp autumn afternoon, a letter arrived in his campus mailbox. The handwriting made his heart skip. He walked to a quiet bench under the turning leaves, sat down, and unfolded it. Thomas, I've had more time to reflect than I ever expected. For years, I thought revenge would mend the wounds Harold's death left behind. But I see now, revenge is its own prison. Your grace, even when I didn't deserve it, reminded me what it feels like to be human again. Thomas stared out at the campus lawn, the wind cool against his face. The letter trembled in his hands, not from fear, but from the weight of everything they'd both survived. Forgiveness is not weakness, it's strength. The words were written in Vivian's delicate, looping script, words that carried more weight than Thomas had expected. He read the letter slowly, twice, then folded it with care, sliding it into the inside pocket of his jacket. There was no bitterness in her message. No final twist. Just an acknowledgement of pain, of growth, of a choice to stop the cycle. Thank you for being better than the world around you. Thank you for proving that we can break the patterns we inherit. I hope you find the happiness I never could. Vivian Hale. Thomas sat with the silence for a while. Then, quietly, he stood and walked out into the afternoon light, feeling, for the first time in a long time, a sense of peace that didn't come with a catch. 1 year later, he stood in front of a modest crowd in a bright community hall in Austin, Texas. Behind him hung a simple wooden plaque. The Harold Hale Scholarship Fund. 4 second chances. He adjusted the MIC, cleared his throat, and smiled. This fund isn't just about tuition or books. It's about something deeper, creating a path forward for people who feel forgotten. It's about turning pain into purpose, giving someone the break that life never gave them. The crowd applauded. Some eyes brimmed with tears. Among the recipients were young people who, like Thomas once had, carried the weight of family mistakes, lost dreams, and unspoken fears. After the ceremony, Thomas found a quiet bench beneath a tree outside. The autumn breeze rustled through the leaves. He watched a young woman, one of the new scholars, hug her mother tightly. He smiled. This was what moving forward looked like. Not vengeance. Not silence. But hope. Vivian's letter still rested in his jacket pocket, not as a burden, but as a reminder of what they both had learned. That forgiveness isn't a surrender, it's a release. That healing doesn't come from winning, but from understanding. And that even the darkest chapters can end in light, if we choose it. As Thomas walked away from the event, the sky stretched wide and clear overhead, no longer grey, no longer looming. A chapter had closed. But this time, it wasn't with the slam of a door, it was with a quiet, resolute breath. One that said, I'm free now. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of resilience, redemption, and forgiveness. Thomas's story is a powerful reminder that even when life pulls us into darkness, the choices we make can still lead us toward light. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales that touch the heart and remind us of what truly matters: compassion, courage, and the strength to forgive. Until next time, Take care of your heart. And remember, every ending can be a new beginning.